Welcome back. We're having a robust discussion on women's sports and how that works vis-a-vis the trans issue. And joining me again is Dr. Linda Blade. Appreciate you coming back on, Coach Blade. We talked about how some of these decisions or even lack of clarity with some of these non-decisions has impacted female enrollment in women's sports. How has the trans community responded? I appreciate World Athletics, but in Canada, for example, first of all, I guess I should ask, is this a real prevalent issue? Are there that many trans women, so biological male who identify as women? Are there many who want to get into women's sports? Is this a real big issue, or are we just hearing very loud one-off cases? And the second question is, what's their response to some of these decisions that have been going on?
Well, it's very interesting to see the dynamic in, for example, a restricted sport versus an open sport. So restricted, like athletics, world track and field, we don't have that many, one or two. But then we have cycling, world cycling, that has encouraged trans inclusion for a very long time. And you'll see race after race. Now, if you ever go on Twitter and say cycling, trans and cycling, there's a male athlete winning a female race almost every other day now. So some sports, it starts happening a lot if you go there. And those that are restrictive, it's an interesting combination of reactions. You have to keep in mind that the trans community includes females that identify as men and males that identify as female or as women. So the male-born, so let's start with the female-born. The female-born trans quietly stay in the women's category because they just want to, they wouldn't really have a chance against male-born people. Most of them stay in. And in fact, you'll see a lot of that going on in now at the ground level in women's soccer and everything. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of non-binary and trans female-born staying in women's sports. So we accept them because, they're female. So they're quietly already with us. We're already trans supportive on the female side. But then it's in the male side, the ones who want to transition from male to woman, they're the ones also demanding to come into the female side. The question is, why can't the male athletes in the male sector just handle their trans like the women handle our trans and just keep it like that? And I mean, once again, it's just one more example in history of the fact that women, the female category, is just supposed to absorb and deal with a male issue. I think each one of our sex-based categories should simply deal with the people who want to express differently within each category and be done with it. But no, somehow we have to accommodate also the males. So in a sense, the female category becomes the open, and the men's are the restricted, where it should be the opposite. The female category should be, and this is what World Athletics said, mm-hmm. The female category restricted to those born female because anybody else coming in has a competitive advantage. So really, the male section operates as the open category because anybody new going over to the male side does not have an advantage. So,
and that's a very good point. And perhaps we can segue into just briefly. So what is the physical advantage that a biological born male has competing in a female category? I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious, but for our viewers who may not be as familiar, you have a PhD in kinesiology. Tell us, what are those big advantages?
Yeah, depending on the sport. So running and jumping, running is about 10 to 12%, jumping about maybe 15 to 20%, throwing objects about 30% advantage, male advantage. And then something like boxing, an actual punch has men have 160% advantage.
Wow. You see, when you break it down to numbers like that, you can't, how do you debate that? And these are bona fide scientific numbers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's been studied for sure. It's been measured. Sure. Easy. On the world records, you can do the percentages off the world records charts and so on. But it's interesting because Boxing Canada and Judo Canada, physical contact sports, they're allowing full self-ID.
So will women continue in those sports?
Well, they're going to get smashed. And I mean, we're going to be contributing, of course, to the burden of the medical system because you go in there and you're not told because we're not allowed to say. So suddenly a woman shows up into the ring and the person, her opponent, ends up being a male athlete. And what's she going to do? I mean, she doesn't know till the first punch and her skull is crushed that she's maybe she'd notice it in advance, but we're not, the problem is most of these policies in Canada, they come along with a phrase that you're not allowed to really say, and nobody has to declare.
My goodness. Well, I mean, I can see any young woman who's trying to go through that path. I don't see how they would continue based on what you're saying.
They
here.
wouldn't.
My goodness.
You won't win anyway.
Well, we're going to unpack. I actually want to end on a high note in the next segment. We're going to talk about many other things, but also what are some of the positives we're seeing in women's sports. We'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.